Welcome to the 33rd Annual Mayor's Environment Expo. As we come together from around the city, I would like to acknowledge that the Calgary area, where the Bow and Elbow Rivers meet, is a place of confluence, where the sharing of ideas and opportunities naturally come together. Indigenous people were the original caretakers of this land and the first champions of environmental conservation. This land is a home that we all share, and it's vitally important that we protect our home, our environment, by working together. What drives my optimism is seeing the innovation and commitment to climate action from all of you, our students. I will continue to amplify youth voices on the climate crisis, and I look forward to hearing your ideas. I hope this session sparks conversations and encourages all of us to take greater action in protecting our environment. Thank you all for participating.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah and I am an Information Officer with Alberta Environment and Parks. With me today is Natalie and Robin assisting with the question and answer sessions, and welcome to our session on responsible outdoor recreation. I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that I am speaking to you today from the traditional territory of Treaty 7, and that we are coming together online from the traditional territories and homelands of many Indigenous peoples. I would like to acknowledge the treaties in this province, as all of Alberta is treaty land and we are all treaty people. I acknowledge the long history and deep connections that First Nations and Métis peoples have to this land. I honour this today in the hopes of working together in a good way. Alberta Environment and Parks is responsible for the care of our natural environment. One part of my job is to help Albertans like you enjoy the great outdoors. Today, we are going to plan a camping trip with some fun recreation activities you can do outside of the city. And since we want to be good to the environment, we will also learn how to do those things responsibly. What does responsible even mean, though? Responsible means responsible means you take good care of something. And to be responsible, you want to be prepared, do your research and know the rules, be respectful, follow the rules to take care of everyone and everything involved. Let's think about it in terms of having a pet. Here are some ways to be a responsible pet owner. You need to be prepared by doing your research before you even get a pet. From deciding what kind of time and space you have for your pet, to what your pet will need daily, weekly, monthly, and even every year. We might need to know the rules surrounding having a pet, like any licenses or cleaning up after them. And to be a responsible pet owner, you need to be respectful and take good care of your pet and their home. For example, keeping your dog on a leash, not letting it bark at people walking by, not letting your cat chase birds, or even cleaning up your fish tank. Just like being a responsible pet owner involves being prepared and being respectful, responsible recreation involves a lot of the same things. To help us practice, let's plan a pretend camping trip together. When we are planning for outdoor adventure, it is important to consider the who, what, where, when, and why of our trip, although not necessarily in that order. Our Happy Campers trip planning guide will help us. If you don't have a copy of the guide in front of you, not to worry. You can grab a blank sheet of paper and a pencil to plan our trip, or just follow along with me. Let's start by putting our names at the top. The first thing we need to do is decide when we are going to go on our adventure. Let's plan to go when school is out in July. Canada Day long weekend is July 1st to 4th, and since it's a long weekend, we can camp for 3 nights. Let's all fill in the dates July 1st to 4th in our Happy Campers trip planning guide. When we go camping might impact where we go, the activities we do, and what we bring. For example, we can't go skiing in July, and I may not want to go biking in January. We will have to check the weather forecast when we are closer to the trip date. Next, let's decide what activities we will do. For our trip, we will plan to camp out and have one motorized and non-one motorized activity. When I go camping, I usually stay in a tent, but sometimes I have stayed in an RV. What kind of camping do you want to do? Let's decide if we are going to camp in an RV or a tent. And remember, we are planning a pretend camping trip. So even if you don't have a tent or an RV at home, you may still have one to use on this imaginary trip. The question is in the Q&A box. What do you want to use to camp? Teachers, if you could please choose which your class would like to do by liking the tent or RV option, choosing that thumbs up button to answer.
Hi everyone, this is Natalie. I work with Hannah with Alberta Environment and Parks, and I'm watching the Q&A box to see your responses on if you would like to tent or go camping in an RV. While we're waiting, Hannah, have you ever gone camping in a tent or RV?
I usually go camping in a tent, and that's because I like to find some smaller spaces to go camping. RVs are usually a little bit bigger than a tent, and it's more difficult to find a space to fit your RV. But I have been camping in an RV, and it is nice to sometimes have that extra luxury of a proper bed.
Especially if the weather's a little colder.
Yes.
One of my favorite things is that my parents have an RV, and so sometimes we go camping with them and we get to stay in a tent, which is nice because we get to hear all the sounds of nature as we're sleeping and in the morning. But then there's an RV, which we call our home base, where we can use the sink and make our food in, and that's really nice. I kind of think that's the best of both worlds sometimes.
Yeah, that sounds great, Natalie.
So right now we have a RV is in a slight lead. We have 3 people who liked RV and 3 people who liked tent, but then one person also replied RV for us. Connect Charter Grade 4. Thanks, guys. So I think RV it is.
Okay, great choice, everybody. Let's go camping in an RV. So on our Happy Campers trip planning guide, in our camping section, we are going to write RV. Now, whether we are camping in an RV, trailer, or tent, we want to be sure that we are responsible campers. So let's think about what we can do to be prepared, know the rules, and be respectful. You may find some of this information useful for filling in the Be Respectful Fill in the Blanks section on your trip planner, but don't worry if you don't get it down. We will have time to go through that section at the end. When we are camping on public land, which is sometimes called random camping, you can choose to camp just about anywhere. You can't make a reservation though, so you have to just hope that you'll find a spot. When you are choosing a place to camp, look for hard surfaces so you're not leaving big marks on the ground. Don't camp within 30 meters of a water body or close to any oil wells or other industrial activity. And if you see an animal den or well-used trails, you might want to move as well. Limit your stay to 14 days on public land. And this makes sure that the environment gets a rest and that others may also have time to visit. In provincial parks, you can stay for up to 16 days. And finally, leave nothing behind. Collect all garbage, recycling, and your belongings and take them home with you. Now that we are ready for camping, let's talk about what other activities we can do while we are out there. I'm sure we all have our favourites, or maybe there is something that we would like to try for the first time. In the summer, there's lots to do outdoors while camping, and we're going to be choosing one non-motorised activity to do. A non-motorised activity is just like it sounds, it doesn't have a motor. So some examples of popular non-motorised activities include hiking, biking, horseback riding, canoeing, or fishing. Again, we will use the question and answer function to choose a non-motorised activity during our camping trip. This could be a chance to do something new or to choose one of your favourites that you know and love. Teachers, please help us choose what activity your class wants to do. If you could make sure you choose by liking the non-motorised activity option using that thumbs up button on the answer.
Great, thanks, Hannah. Robin has put all of those options into the Q&A, and so we'll just give a moment for all of the students and teachers to vote and choose what their favorite option is. Hannah, what are some of your favorite non-motorized activities that you do when you're camping?
I love to go hiking and also canoeing as well. I have actually never been horseback riding in Canada, so that would be something that I would be down for trying though for a first time. That would be quite cool. I think all non-motorized are some of my favorites though, because you get to enjoy nature and it's usually quite quiet while you're doing those activities too.
Have you ever been fishing?
I have never been fishing in Canada either. I know that some of the fish are the same here as they are back in England, so maybe I'll catch some familiar ones. I also know that fishing takes a lot of patience, so I'm prepared to not catch anything too.
You would still have fun just sitting by the water.
I think I would, yeah.
Well, so far it seems like a lot of people would like to go horseback riding. Maybe they have tried it before, or maybe it would be a new activity. If you voted for horseback riding, you could also hit that reply button and let us know if this is a new activity for you or something that you do regularly and you just love. Also, if you're clicking off, I see more votes coming in for biking, canoeing, hiking. You can also hit reply and let us know where you'd like to do those activities. Personally, I love to go canoeing, and just last weekend I was canoeing on the Red Deer River. So the votes have evened off here, Hannah, and it looks like horseback riding is in the lead.
Okay, we'll take that as our sign then to go horseback riding. Great choice, everybody. Even if this is an activity you do already or it's a new one that we're going to pretend trying on our trip, great. We are going to add that under our non-motorized activity on our Happy Campers worksheet. So when we are planning for non-motorized activities, there are a few things that we can do to be responsible recreationalists. If we fish or canoe, we have to clean, drain, or dry our gear. And this prevents unwanted critters from moving around into new water bodies, hitching a ride on any of our equipment. Exploring public land is a fun way to get out, but we always need to stay on the trails, and we need to share the trail with other users, especially in some of our busier locations. We need to be bear smart, traveling in groups, making noise, and carrying bear spray and knowing how to use it are great ways to be bear smart. We need to never leave food or garbage laying around and pack out all of that garbage as well. Bears have a great sense of smell, and they will try just about anything in case it's food. Now let's choose a motorized activity. Some examples of popular motorized activities include off-road motorcycles and dirt bikes, off-highway vehicles or OHVs such as quadding, or even side-by-side. So now is your time to choose the motorized activity that you would like to do. Teachers, if you could help us choose what activity your class wants to do by liking the option that they pick.
Excellent. So exciting to see what all the students are going to choose for what we're going to do on our camping trip. Which of these motorized activities would you like to try, Hannah?
Oh, so I have tried quadding before, and that's pretty fun. But I like the idea of side by side because then you get to enjoy it with someone else in the same vehicle as you.
Is a side-by-side like a quad?
It kind of is, yeah. It's kind of like a bigger version of a quad with more space.
And do you have to go slower when you're in a side-by-side?
I mean, I think you have to be more careful in a side by side because you've got more people, but I think you can go just the same speed, if not a little bit faster.
Well, that does sound fun. I'd also really like to try motorbiking. I have never, and it would be a little bit scary. I've ridden on the back of a motorbike on a road before, but never in parks and in public land. And I really like that idea because I really like biking too. So I wonder if it would be a good sport for me. So far from our students, riding my quad is in the lead. We do see many people out these days riding their quads, especially around in the mountains. Let's give one more minute to see if anyone else has a vote before we make our final decision. Okay, Hannah, we're going to be riding quads for our trip.
Okay, great choice, everybody. Again, if it's something you already love or you've picked this as the activity that is new to you. So in our motorized section of our Happy Campers trip planning guide, we are going to write quadding. Now, motorized recreation can be a lot of fun, but there are also a lot of ways that we have to be prepared to follow the rules and be respectful. First up is keeping wheels out of water. Do not ride along the shore or in water bodies and use established crossings like bridges. Make sure to plan your route and use trails that allow your activity of choice. Not all trails are for motorized to use. And we need to yield to other users. Non-motorized users have the right of way, and we should be aware of any other signs that are out on our trails as well. So we might recognize this one as a picture of a quad. Hopefully we recognize this one as a do not enter. And our yield sign as well. Follow the rules or laws for your activity. For example, OHVs require safety equipment, such as a headlight, a tail light, and users are required to wear a helmet. It's the law. If you are younger than 14, you need to be with an adult as well. Now, there is one more activity that we should talk about that everyone will need to do, no matter if you are hiking or quadding, camping, or just out for the day, and that's using the bathroom. But what if there is no bathroom? In many public land locations, there are outhouses in parking lots or in staging areas, but very few outhouses once you get out onto the trails. And in that case, you are going to have to use the bush. So let's talk about a few things to do. You should always bury your waste. Carry a small shovel so that you can make a hole in the ground, and always dig your hole first. Never leave toilet paper out on the ground, and go away from the trails and from any water or sensitive ground too. So now we should have our activities all filled out. So please make sure that we have RV for camping, that we have horseback riding for non-motorized, and we have quadding written down for motorized. I'm sure your handwriting is much better than ours is on our sheet of paper here. So I'll give you just a minute to check and make sure you have the right things written down there. So now that we know what we want to do, we can decide where we are going to go. Some places in Alberta are better than others for recreation, especially since we have certain types of activities that we want to do, and we will have to find the best place for each of those activities. Today, we are focused on Alberta's public land. Public land has many different uses, such as for recreation, forestry, agriculture, and even for nature conservation. Different types of land have different rules for what can and can't be done there. Public land is part of Alberta's Crown Land, which includes areas like provincial parks, wilderness areas, and natural areas. Public land does not include any national parks like Banff or Jasper, which are run by the Government of Canada, and it does not include any towns and cities like Calgary. Public land is run by the Government of Alberta and is for every Albertan to benefit from. Let's look at some public land use areas around Calgary that allows for all of our chosen activities to see where we should go. One of the best resources you can look at while planning a trip is the Alberta Guide to Outdoor Recreation. In there we have maps showing the public land and the public land uses. This map shows us Kananaskis, or K-Country, which is one of Alberta's most popular public land use zones. It also shows some of the surrounding public land use areas, such as Bow Valley Wildland, McLean Creek, and Elbow Sheep Wildland. If we had that book to hand, we could flip over to the next page and see the charts for permissible activities. These maps and charts can help us decide where is the best place for this activity, including where we can and can't go. So we can start to see that there are some crosses and some ticks So a green check mark shows that there are things allowed, and a grey X is not allowed. You might also see a blue check mark in there, and that usually means that it's seasonal. Camping is allowed in all of these public land use zones, and so is our non-motorized activity, horseback riding. You'll see on this picture, it's actually written as equestrian. But there is no motorized activities allowed in Kananaskis. So we're going to need to find somewhere else to go to do our motorized activity. But why do you think that there is no motorized activity allowed in Kananaskis? Well, the main reason why Kananaskis is one of the areas that we do not allow motorized vehicles is to protect the delicate ecosystems, including all the plants and animals that live there. Thankfully, though, McLean Creek is close by, and that allows for motorized activities. You can see it has a whole column of blue check marks. So we can go quadding in McLean Creek. Let's fill in our Happy Camper trip planner with where we are going to go. So we will camp in Kananaskis, and then we can go horseback riding in Kananaskis as well. But for one day of our trip, we will need to take our quads to McLean Creek in order to do that activity. I will give you just a little bit more time to write down the where we are going. We have our basic plan together, but to be responsible, we need to look into if there is anything else we need to know to be prepared. One new rule for Kananaskis is that anyone visiting the park for camping, hiking, or anything else will need a Kananaskis conservation pass. Otherwise, you might get a ticket. The money from this pass helps to pay to keep our land clean and safe and ensure that we can use this area for recreation now and in the future. We can buy a Kananaskis conservation pass online before we leave on our trip. So under the Be Prepared section, which is the bottom left of our worksheet, we can check off the Kananaskis Conservation Pass. We might come back to some of these other things later on. Now, a lot of what we will be talking about today does not apply to Indigenous peoples. For example, an Indigenous person may not need to purchase a pass to go to Kananaskis. Indigenous peoples have used this land for centuries, including for fishing, hunting, trapping, gathering resources for food and medicine, and other cultural and spiritual practices. Non-Indigenous people also have access to the public land for culture, food and recreation, but have a different set of rules to follow. The Government of Canada recognises the long-standing use of the land by Indigenous peoples, and so they have unique rights to use the land. Our plan is really coming together. But before we start packing our bags, who do you think we should check in with? Who can help us pack by telling us how warm it will be? The Weather Network. Weather makes a big difference for what we need to pack. For example, we should always bring lots of layers, but we may also want to bring an extra rain jacket, rain pants, or even shorts depending on the temperature. So let's think positive and circle the sunny icon on our trip planner. That way we can bring our shorts and not our rain boots. But what if the weather has been really hot and dry? What other website do you think we should be checking? We should check for fire hazard. Enjoying a campfire can be a fun way to warm up or cook food on your trip. But before lighting a campfire, we need to check fire bans for the area. Alberta fire bans can tell you if there are restrictions on activities like having a campfire or quadding. And it can also let you know if there is a closure due to an active fire in the area you plan to visit. Now, since this is our pretend trip, let's circle that the fire hazard is low. And that way we can still have a campfire and still go quadding too. So we should now have circled the sun in our weather, and we should have also circled low on our fire hazard. We also need to make sure we have equipment nearby to help us put out a fire before lighting it, like a bucket of water and a long stick or a shovel. Never leave your campfire unattended. And when you are putting out your fire, be sure to soak it, stir it, and soak it again. Then continue doing this until the ashes are cool to the touch. There is one more site we should check out before we leave, and that's the trail conditions. Trail conditions change a lot over the course of the year, depending on the season and the weather. Sometimes, if we have a rainy summer, trails might be too wet or flooded. In the summer, though, it is most important that we check for trail and area closures for wildlife, such as if there is a mama bear with cubs. If you know where you are going, it should only take a few minutes to check that your trail is open. This can save you a lot of time later from getting to your site and being turned away. And whenever we are going onto trails, we should follow the posted signs and stay on the trail. So we're going to mark dry for our trail conditions. That way we can enjoy all of our activities for our pretend camping trip. If you have any troubles when you are out on public land, you can call 310 Land to report it. Other numbers you can call are 310 Fire if you see a fire, or if you see someone not following the rules when they are out fishing or hunting, you can call Report a Poacher. The other thing we should do when we get ready to go is let someone know where you are going and when you will be back. Then make sure you actually tell them when you get home so that you're not worried you're lost somewhere. Sometimes when you are out on public land, there is no cell service. Try to be aware of when you last had cell service so that you can go back there if you need to. We are used to looking up anything on our phones, so it can be hard to imagine not having it. Make sure you have all the important information written down, paper copies of maps, or downloaded for offline access, including any camping passes. If you do not have a lot of camping, if you do a lot of camping in areas with no cell service, it is also a good idea to have a satellite phone as well. So we can check off some of the other things in our Be Prepared list. We checked off Kananaskis Conservation Pass already. We're going to think about taking a water bucket and a shovel. We're going to think about taking some perhaps first aid kits, equipment for our activity, and also some waste bags as well. We're going to move on and fill in the Be Respectful, fill in the blank section. So if you were listening closely earlier on, these will be easier to fill out, but we are going to go through them all together now anyway. When you camp on public land, limit your stay to 14 days. If you go in the water, clean, drain, dry your boat and gear. If you quad, ATV, or bike, keep your wheels out of water. Explore public land, but always stay on the trail and share the trail with other people. If you see a problem, call 310 Land. And just like with some of our phone numbers, those letters do stand for a number. So 310 Land, if you were to type it in, would be 310 5263. Be bear smart. Never leave food or garbage laying around. And finally, prevent wildfire. Soak it, stir it, and soak it again. So to go through those again quickly, when you camp on public land, limit your stay to 14 days. If you go in the water, clean, drain, dry your boat and gear. If you quad, ATV, or bike, keep your wheels out of water. Explore public land, but always stay on the trail and share the trails with other people. If you see a problem, call 310 Land. Be bear smart. Never leave food or garbage laying around. And prevent wildfire. Soak it, stir it, and soak it again. Fun and responsible outdoor recreation starts with a good plan, just like our Happy Camper trip planner. Taking camping trips and exploring Poundland is a fun and exciting way to stay healthy, be outdoors, spend time with friends and family, and connect with nature. But to have the very best time, you will want to plan ahead, ensure you know all the rules, and check that there are no warnings and closures. This way you can relax and have fun without any problems. Just like how when we are responsible for our pet, they are happy and healthy. When we are responsible for recreation activities, it means that we are taking good care of ourselves and good care of our land and water. This keeps the environment healthy and it ensures Albertans can continue to use and enjoy it for a long time. As we say goodbye, we'll share a few links to trip planning resources. There are also a lot more resources on alberta.ca. And if you ever need help with anything, just call 310 Land and they will help you. You might even speak to me. Remember that planning ahead can help keep everyone safe and have a safe and enjoyable outdoor adventure. Be sure to respect others and the land so that we can continue to enjoy Alberta's public land now and into the future. So thank you so much for listening to our responsible outdoor recreation presentation and for being good protectors of our environment.
Great, thanks, Hannah. I learned a lot on that presentation and I hope everyone else did too. Robin has put a question into the Q&A asking if anyone has any questions. So students and teachers, if you have any questions for Hannah, please put that into the Q&A box now and we'll try to answer them the best we can. Hannah, in the meantime, I had a question about that 310 Land phone number. You said that you help answer those calls?
That's right, yeah. So there are actually a lot of people helping you on 310 Land. there's a couple of different ways that the 310 land phone number works. If you see something happening on our public land that you think shouldn't be happening, you can report it, and they will quite often send out an enforcement officer to check what's going on in the area. But I also help answer any general questions that you might have. Maybe that's whether an area is open, or maybe whether you need a different type of camping pass for an area, or even questions regarding what goes on the landscape, like whether you need a permit to cut down trees. So we're good for all the information that you might need.
Great, thanks. We also have a question from Connect Charter Grade 4. Where do you find the fire hazard level?
That is a great question. So there is the Firebands website, and it's a great resource tool because it has all the different areas marked on it. So it will let you zoom right into where you think you're going to go, and it will give you an update for that as well. So what we hope to see is just some nice green areas on the map. Worst case scenario, you're going to see lots of red covering a map if we're in the middle of a wildfire event, perhaps. So the Firebands website is the best place to go.
Great, and I just put that link into the comment box there. So it's albertafirebands.ca. We also have a question from Miss G's grade 4 class. They were wondering, what if you get lost and don't have a phone?
That is a great question. So we are all very reliable on our phones right now. They all have Google Maps on them. It's really easy to navigate when you have cell service. So if you are in an area where you don't have cell service, you don't really know where you are, we are hoping that you have some sort of map with you to at least give you an example of the lay of the land in that area. Some things you can do, you can start to backtrack your steps. If you were following a little trail, it might be easier to turn around and head back to somewhere more obvious, somewhere that you think you know where you are again. There are ways that you can navigate to avoid yourself getting lost, and the best thing to do that is actually to make sure you stay on well-marked trails. Try not to take any shortcuts that might lead you to being in a position where you're lost. Once you're back in any cell service, if you are lost, that is when you can call 310 land, or you can call 911 if you are in an emergency situation whilst lost, and we will get someone out to find you.
Great, I sure hope that no one gets lost. And one thing I always remember too when I'm out is that water is always flowing downhill. And so if you do see any little creeks and you're trying to make your way back down the mountain, you can always, take the clue from the creek and know which direction you need to be going to go back down the hill. And we have another question here coming in from Sage. What would you do if you were camping and saw a bear?
That is a great question. Now, we do have a really handy Bear Smart guide, which I think maybe can be linked in our comments. But it really depends where you're seeing the bear and what's going on with the whole situation as to how you're going to respond to it. So seeing a bear really far away on a hill the other side of the valley, that's nothing to be worried about. It's when we're starting to get into closer contact with these big animals, and that's not just bears, but that can be with a lot of different things, that we need to start being really cautious and being really aware of what's going on. So as a bear maybe has noticed us, we want to be making sure that we are aware of our surroundings, that we're watching the bear, what it's doing, and that we are watching for its next steps. At this point, we don't need to have our bear spray ready because the bear has just noticed us. That bear, though, is probably going to walk off. We probably smell not very nice. We're going to be talking. We're going to be noisy. They don't really want to interact with us where they can. But that bear maybe is a young bear. They might be interested in us, at which point perhaps they are going to start to walk towards us. Okay, that's when we need to be starting to get ready. So maybe your hand is on your bear spray now, you're going to be backing away, and we need to be making sure that the bear has an escape route from any places that we might be. So if we're blocking the only way out, that's not the greatest place to be. We want to make sure that the bear can go somewhere without interacting with us. Okay, then maybe our bear is getting aggressive, it's getting quite scary. That's when we want to be ready with our bear spray. Okay, bears quite often do something called a bluff charge, which is really to scare you more than anything else. Okay, so that's when we are being very cautious. We can use our bear spray. All of the instructions are on bear sprays. Sometimes they are different from each other, but there's usually a cap that you can take off, and you want to be spraying it down so that it goes into the bear's nose. If you think it's really windy and that it's going to be blowing in your face, that's not a great situation to be in. And finally, there is getting down on the ground as a very last resort, digging your toes into the ground, covering your hands over your head. Hopefully it will leave you alone. Otherwise, we're looking to fight for our lives. But we're really looking at that being a very, very last case scenario. Most instances of bears is that they will go their own way. They don't really want to interact with you, okay? And we don't want to be climbing any trees, because bears can climb trees too.
Thanks, Hannah. We had a question from Hunter. How do we know what plants are poisonous?
That is a great question. There are lots of plants out there that are totally edible, but you're right, there are some that are poisonous. So it's always best to be cautious. And if you don't know what something is, you shouldn't be touching it or picking it, or certainly not eating it, just in case something does go wrong. There are lots of different guidebooks out there. If you want to really dive into some of that knowledge and be more confident in what our native plant species are out like that, it's a very cool thing to know and to have, but we always recommend that people are overly cautious around plants in our wild spaces.
Thank you. And what we always say is if you're not sure what it is, don't eat it. We also have a question from Seth. If you are tenting, what should you do if a hailstorm occurs?
Okay, that is a great question. Now, hail is obviously a lot harder on your tent than rain. Tents are usually fairly good at withstanding hail, but I always like to, when I tent, is to actually put up an extra tarpaulin over the top of my tent. So I don't have to like completely get soaked or get covered in hail if I just step outside of my tent. So I always like to have an extra tarpaulin over the top as well. If you think a situation is getting really scary to the point that you might have a tent collapse on top of you, you might want to go outside of your tent and shelter under a tree instead. But Natalie, do you have any top tips for being in a tent in the hail?
You know, I remember one time camping and there was such a big rainstorm. I was very concerned that there was going to be some hail that came down. There was thunder, there was lightning, and there was big rain. Now, fortunately, there was no hail. And so, yeah, I would say, just like you, Hannah, that if there was a tent or a tarp over top of the tent to deflect some of that hail, that's a good idea. Also, you want to be careful whenever you're putting up your tent that you're not putting it underneath any branches that look like they might be dead on the trees, so that if there is a big storm and any branches fell down from those trees, they wouldn't be falling onto your tent. So just when you're putting up your tent, look up, look around. If there's leaves on those trees, you should be fine. But if there are no leaves on those branches, then that branch might be dead and it might fall down. So yeah, just take a look around. The other thing is sometimes when I'm tenting, I might have a car nearby. And so if you are car camping, and so that you could go and sit in your car during that worst part of the hailstorm, that's another option too. And if there's any other questions, I'll give a final call for questions here. Otherwise, we might just be ending a few minutes early. While we wait, Hannah, do you have any plans for any outdoor recreation on public lands this summer?
I am planning on going backcountry camping. So backcountry camping, for those of you that don't know, is where you can't drive into a site. You have to park your car and then you have to hike or bike or horseback ride in to find a good site. So that's my plan for a couple of weekends this summer. I'm pretty excited about that. I also plan on doing some just day hikes as well, exploring some of the places that I haven't really visited here in Alberta.
That sounds like fun. What do you do when you're backcountry for food and cooking?
I always take a stove with me, a little camping stove. If you're really fancy, you can take in dehydrated food and then rehydrate it with water as you cook it. Or you can also take in like full actual food as well. I have done both. Taking in full food can make your bag quite heavy. But if you're taking dehydrated food, it gives you a little bit more scope to pack light, as long as you know that you're going to have enough water either with you or at your camping site to rehydrate everything afterwards. So yeah, I also like to take lots of snacks with me as well, because I always get very hungry when I'm out hiking, especially carrying a backpack as well.
Do you carry all of the water or do you have a filter system?
I like to carry enough water with me just in case anything goes wrong, but I do also take with me, I take water filtration tablets. They make it taste a little bit more like a swimming pool with chlorine, but it's usually an hour for a liter of water to be treated, and then it's perfectly safe for drinking. It's good to know that you have water in case it's a little bit further to anywhere else where you can get fresh water, which is why I like to take extras with me. But trying to plan, knowing that a site you're going to has a water source with it is always a good idea.
Great tips. Not seeing any other questions come in, so it might be time that we can say goodbye to all of the classes.
All right, well, thank you so much again, everyone. It's wonderful to have so many of you join us today for our Responsible Outdoor Recreation presentation. You do all have your Happy Camper trip planner with you now, so take this with you. Use it for any future exciting trips that you plan to take this year or into the future, and check out any of our resources that we have left for you as well. Remember that you are being good protectors of our environment by taking these extra steps to be respectful, be responsible, and continue to have great time out there. So thanks, everyone.